Good afternoon and welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillow, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School, Washington University in St. Louis. So glad to have you with us for today's program. I want to thank and acknowledge a couple of colleagues that are helping me with the production on today's program. Cynthia Williams, the Brown School's Assistant Dean for Community Partnerships, is here helping to moderate the chat. And helping with the technical side of things, we have Natalie Galusha from the Friedman Center. So appreciate their participation and their help. For folks joining us on Zoom, just want to remind you that in the webinar format, you all are muted. We can't see or hear you, and we also can't call on raised hands, but the Zoom chat feature is enabled. And if you have questions or comments, we're going to have polls. This is meant to be interactive, so please do warm up your typing fingers because we would like you to be a part of the conversation today. Folks joining us on YouTube, we're really glad to have you with us, and we don't have a way to moderate your questions or comments. So before we get started, let me just share a few things that are coming up in the next week or so with Open Classroom, which we hope will be of interest. On Thursday of this week, we're back on. The Clark Fox Policy Institute has developed a really wonderful panel reviewing the Biden administration's first 100 days with a specific focus on the impact of family well-being. So sort of a policy review and looking forward. And then next week, in the ramp up actually to Mother's Day, it's Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week, and Open Classroom has two related programs. On Tuesday, May the 4th, Washington University alum Ariel Wilderman is going to be joined by Dr. Diane Sanford, and they're doing a program called The Worst Kept Secret, talking about maternal mental health, postpartum depression. And then on Thursday, May the 6th, is a panel discussion, We Are Not Broken, Why Equity Matters in Maternal Mental Health. Experts with a focus on service here in the St. Louis community, disparities, needs, and resources. So if that's interesting to you, I'm going to throw a link in the chat in a bit. We would love to have you come back for one of those programs. But you're here for a great program. And to get us started, I want to introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Nancy Morrill-Howell. She's the Betty Bofinger Brown Distinguished Professor of Social Policy at the Brown School. She's also the director of the university's Harvey A. Friedman Center on Aging, which promotes gerontological research and education across disciplines and across the various schools of Washington University. So without further ado, please take us away, Nancy.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks, Cynthia, for hosting us, and Natalie Galusha, the manager of the Center for Aging, and is a partner on all of this content today. If you joined us last week, great. And if you're for the first time today, we're going to catch you up and move forward, knowing that all of last week's program is recorded. This program focuses on non-financial aspects of retirement, all the things that matter for a good life before or after our work years, meaning, purpose, social connection, leisure, self-care. Planning for these aspects of life just don't get as much attention as financial planning for retirement. So we developed this workshop to complement financial planning services. We have targeted the employees at WashU in the past, but we're delighted to be opening it up more widely to community members from all over. But we are aware that some of you might not have the financial planning support that we have at WashU. So we've included in the resources some ideas for you to find some links, some readings that might be helpful to you. So here's a bit of a recap from last week. So today we're going to recap, and then we're going to start thinking about taking some action steps and planning, and a bit about the resources that are available to you. Last week, we focused on, first of all, the when of retiring, whether you're retiring soon or not for a long time. We had people begin to think about a push-pull model. An assessment tool was provided. Natalie's going to put a link to that tool in the chat, or maybe has. If you don't have it, it's also on our website. But this is a tool that helps you think a bit about what pushes you from work, what keeps you there, what pulls you into retirement, questions about what will you miss from the workplace? What are you looking forward to when you step back from work? So just to get you thinking about the when of retirement. But we made the point that sometimes we step out when we're not ready financially. Sometimes we don't step out, even though we could, because of all the other reasons that we want to talk about today. So the ingredients of a successful retirement we reviewed. You can see all of the domains that we focus on: purpose, social, leisure, health, and wellness. We needed to make the point that these domains are all closely intertwined. You know, we separate them out and separate finances out like these are different things, but we know they're closely entwined and they affect each other. Finally, last week, we thought about these ingredients and what we've learned at this very unique period of time, this period of the pandemic, when we've been doing things a lot differently. What did we learn during the pandemic that will serve us well when we think about the next chapter of our life? So without further ado, we're going to pick it up from there. Chris Frey, our valued colleague, will be leading our program again. Chris is a psychotherapist, an author, a teacher who talks to many people about life planning and fulfillment. So we're delighted that he's with us again today. Chris?
Thanks, Nancy. And thank you to the whole WashU team for including me in this project over time, and particularly the folks online today that have helped me translate my part into the Zoom environment. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to start with, in the next slide, just kind of picking up where we left off, thinking about who will you be after you leave your full-time job or series of jobs in the career that you've been in. We like to think about this in terms of who will you become, who will you continue to be, what will you carry with you, and who are you yet to become? How are you going to spend your time and your energy in what we like to call a vibrant aging process? The title of the work being, what is your next move? What is your encore experience? Many of us have a great deal of our identity wrapped around our jobs and our career experiences. So who will we be and what actions will we take? Which today we want to jump right into what are some of the possible avenues, the pathways for retirement or the new retirement. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is there's not a great word yet or a great term to replace the word retirement. For many of us, retirement does not hold the kind of energy that perhaps has happened in decades and generations back. We're going to have many of us are going to have multiple pathways. We're going to make multiple choices. There are going to be combinations of pathways and activities and actions that we're involved in that will take place now or at some time in the future as you do your worksheet, but will also continue to evolve over time. So one of our speakers, one of our videos today will speak very well to that. Here are some of these are the pathways as we've envisioned them, and again, want to see them as connected, overlapping, and some will mean much more to you than others. This is really very much about your unique experience. Some of you, by desire or by financial necessity, will be involved in full-time work for quite some time to come, well past some of those standard old-time definitions of retirement in our mid-60s. Some of you will, by desire or necessity, continue part-time work in your successful retirement. You may pursue continued education, which in our definition can mean anywhere from another degree or formal coursework to folks that I know who take a photography class or a gardening class or a dance class and everything in between. Another pathway is, how will you continue to find passion and creativity in your life? One of the things I like to tell folks is we're all creative, whether we know it or not. Many of us think of creativity as artistic. You may not write, you may not paint, you may not play music. However, what have you created in the course of your job or jobs? What have you created in your career? What have you created in your family? What have you created in your life? And so you will continue to find that opportunity available to you as you move forward through your aging process. And oftentimes there'll be more time and energy to devote to certain activities, hobbies, for instance, that perhaps have kind of gone into the margin during your full-time work. Some of you will be self-employed, will shift from being employed within a system to being self-employed. Some of you will enter into volunteerism or expand upon it. The pandemic, an interesting piece of the pandemic is it really has affected volunteerism for some of us, and our ability to go into facilities, into places, and be active. In other ways, though, volunteer opportunities have exploded in some places. I've heard many stories of outdoor activities around food and diapers and supplies. I participated in a diaper gathering project in a local nonprofit agency, and pretty much everything was done outdoors and everybody had masks on, but it was just a beautiful, vibrant volunteer activity. And so some of you may have an opportunity to expand some of the things that you really care about or are passionate about in retirement. And family roles, of course, change. If you were with us last week, you heard Frances talk about the demands of her caregiver role that had gone on for some time, but really at some point demanded that she step away from full-time retirement and invest herself more fully in her son's care. So over time, caregiver roles can change, availability to family, travel, access to family can change in retirement. A couple examples that come to mind that I often talk about, a person that I know who went from full-time employment to part-time self-employment, plus an increase in social action and volunteerism, social justice work. Another person that I know well who transitioned from full-time employment to a grandparent caregiving role. And I just heard recently, because I know this person well, that role is going to increase by one as another addition comes into her family. And this person who has traveled as part of their work world is now traveling more as part of their leisure experience. Someone else I know who transitioned from full-time employment to a part-time consulting role where they had worked and developed their career, and also has expanded a hobby of photography through coursework and travel and teaching. There are lots of different possibilities in terms of how you might join and expand and adapt these roles as you continue to move through your aging process. So what we're looking at in this is part of how you might find a new kind of balance in your life. Some of you may have attended a workshop that I do on balancing your professional and personal lives. This aging process and retirement process creates another whole look for many of us on what balance might look like. It's important to know that your definition of balance will be unique to you. You'll adopt it and adapt it over time as your body changes and your health changes and opportunities change and perhaps social life changes. So this is a working document. We've just put up a couple of graphs of examples of where people might put their focus in a balanced aging stage of life. Yours may look similar to this. Yours may look dynamically different. One concept that I like to throw out when I talk about balance is kind of how you will know, some ideas about how you'll know when you're in and how you know when you're somewhat out of balance. If you're out of balance, many of us are going to tend to use words like bored, a lot of shoulds. I should be, but I'm not. I heard earlier this morning from someone who talked about how they should be engaging in their hobby in retirement, but they are now experiencing some grief and are feeling some loss of energy in pursuing this. So you will feel out of balance if you're doing a lot of shoulding. If you feel understimulated, that will often tell you that as you're going forward, you're feeling more out of balance. When you're in balance, oftentimes when we're in balance, we're going to use words like relaxed, fulfilled, challenged. A word I love is curious. The people I know who are significantly older than me, and I have a lot of close relationships with some wonderful people who are very vibrant in their 70s and 80s and into their 90s. The word curious often comes up there. They're continuing to learn, be curious about life, feel challenged, and feel fulfilled in new and different ways. One term I love to use that I have borrowed from other kinds of work, if you're seeking more balance in preparing, as you look at preparing for retirement, or you're beginning to move through it, is what will your stretch be? How will you stretch yourself? What will be new and different? What are the things that you perhaps haven't tried, would like to try, haven't done, would like to do, would make you somewhat uncomfortable, would be somewhat different in your leisure, your health and wellness, your purpose and meaning, your social network, your family relationships, that will continue to energize you and give you a sense of purpose getting out of bed in the morning. And so this takes us to a little bit of information we'd like to gather from you and have you take a look at for yourself. An opportunity to engage in a poll that is based in some national research and national data. So what we'd like you to do, Natalie's going to be posting this poll, I believe, and we'd like you to pick your top two from this multiple choice list of where you find the greatest purpose in your life, where you hope to find meaning and fulfillment as you continue to move into retirement life. And we'll be posting those results. And Nancy, are we gonna take a look at these together, I think?
Yeah. Chris, I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how it compares to the national survey. I know you have the finding there on the next slide, but clearly spending time with loved ones and doing interesting and enjoyable things are our top two, which makes sense. Fulfilling life's goals. I never quite knew what the survey developers meant by that, because it could be related to loved ones or enjoyable things, but looks interesting. You want to?
Yeah, it reminds me that spending time with loved ones. For one of the early times we did this presentation, we were talking about meaning and purpose and activity and action and volunteerism. And one person said, what if I just want to sit on my deck and rock in my chair and watch my grandchildren play? And everybody was thumbs up for that. Everybody, sounds great. If that's what will give you meaning and greatest meaning and purpose going forward, go for it. Doing interesting, enjoyable things. When I think about fulfilling life goals, some folks will continue to operate out of a sense of personal and professional mission that perhaps they've been engaged in for many, many years. So let's take a look at what the national statistics were. And we're somewhat in the ballpark there in terms of comparisons. Spending time with loved ones, interestingly enough, first and foremost. So that tells us so much about the importance of not only social engagement, but personal, emotional, valuable connection as we continue to age. And we know that that's one of the great stressors in the aging process. If we start to feel cut off from meaningful relationships, how anxiety producing, related to depression, related to sense of isolation, even those of us who are somewhat more introverted, there's a great difference between solitude that we require and isolation that some folks have experienced. The pandemic has heightened this for many. I spoke with someone earlier today about the isolation that their parent feels in a nursing care facility. So these kind of connections are huge as we begin to prepare for retirement, and particularly as we imagine stepping away from the full-time workplace. Before we were all presenting today, there was a conversation among the team about just those casual connections that we make in the hallway or in the lunchroom or wherever that have been somewhat missing in the pandemic. And as we step away from work environment, it takes, I believe, a more conscious intention for many of us to reach out and make those kind of connections. This study offered what I think is 3 pretty wonderful, very simple ideas to put some focus to as we're finding purpose and meaning and preparing for retirement. Giving, growing, and enjoying. So what do I have yet to offer? What do I have yet to give back? What do I have yet to provide that is of value and worth? Because oftentimes in the aging process, folks will begin to feel like, or voice in my work, that they don't feel like they're being drawn upon. So as mentors and teachers and elders, what kind of wisdom and activity is yet to be provided? I've done work with a couple of agencies that have grandparent programs and folks who come in as volunteers, and it's just incredible to see how people work with children. How will you continue to grow? Again, stay curious, learn what will continue to excite you and help you look forward to how you are continuing to grow and change over time. And then what'll just be fun. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. So as Mark Friedman from Encore, an important organization, says, purpose is feeling like the world needs you as much as you need us. That you have something to contribute and that you still matter. And that's what we're talking about, how you will still grow and how you will still matter. Another component that we'd just like to talk a little bit more about that I find just key in this process is leisure. And when I first started to do worksheets in this area, I was kind of stunned by how active the audience often was, and developed a couple of questions that have made for really interesting discussion. And I'd like to offer them to you today. I'm just going to ask you, and if you want to enter this in the chat, you can, not obligated to. How many of you have at least one activity that you do for relaxation, fun, enjoyment, rejuvenation that is so consuming that it really clears your head of other projects and concerns when you're involved in it? So something that really engages you, that closes the rest of the world out. Typically about half of the folks in the audiences I speak to have something. I've heard everything from, I see running, walking, piano playing, yoga. A woman in an audience said to me some months ago, hunting. The list goes on and on. Ballroom dancing, organizing stuff. It's great. Those things, and oftentimes what I find as you're looking for something, if you don't have anything, it typically involves all aspects of who you are. You're thinking about it, it engages you emotionally, and it usually has some movement in it. Doesn't have to be exercise or real physical, but it has some kind of movement in it. So it's kind of a full body experience. If you're an introvert or an extrovert, I often say, how many of you run or bicycle? And then I will ask, how many of you like to bike alone or run alone? And how many of you join biking groups or running groups? And so your personality will often play into what kind of leisure activities that you choose. There are activities that you care about and have drifted away from, and I would encourage you as you prepare to ask yourself, what did I used to do? What did I used to be involved in? What have I fallen away from that I would like to go back to? And what have you promised yourself you would do or do more of someday? Someday when I have the time, someday when I have the energy, I will. And so we'd like to do one more chat with you in that regard and ask you to, this is a sentence completion for those of you who are familiar with that old psychological test. Someday when I have more time, I will whatever related to your leisure. Please answer that if you will. Sleep more. Thank you, Sissy. That's a good one. Exercise, travel, clean your garage, art, get back to painting, garden, travel, gardening, connect more, research, cooking, crafts, volunteer, learn Spanish, genealogy. What else do you see, Nancy?
Well, I was just going to say, that's the aspiration of something we've all said forever. When I have more time, I will. And one of the things that we talked about last week was how the pandemic has given us some more time in some ways, not for a lot of folks who are homeschooling kids, working, but others have discovered that they don't have a real good activity, right, that absorbs them. So I think this first step of just seeing what people, their aspiration is part of the first step of figuring out what you could do for this leisure. Because some of us think we don't know what we do for leisure between working and parenting and, keeping the house, etc.
And some of you may find that stretch that you're talking about. A friend of mine who's learning the harmonica, I went out and bought a 3-wheel recumbent tricycle to switch over to bicycling. My father went back to painting after, I never knew he painted. That's how long ago he had painted. He went back to painting in retirement. So you may find a stretch, something that really pushes you a little beyond your comfort zone. And in that regard, next, I think we have a beautiful short video from Tom that talks about how we can build a retirement with many of those pathways that we talked about earlier, and also be prepared to adapt and change over time.
Hi, my name is Tom Evola. I've worked at the university for over 30 years, and I've been retired now for 2 years. The thing I enjoy most about retirement is the freedom. The scheduling is so much different than the normal work world. The truth is I'm retired from full-time work, and that's because I work part-time. And the best thing about part-time work is that it is part-time. So I have a commitment to be at my part-time job on those very specific days. But it's like every other day in between those days is a weekend. And what I'm involved in now are the things that I would like to explore, and I can explore them on a part-time basis without some of the stress of a full-time demanding job. I spend a lot of time thinking about art and preparing for when I can become a docent. I study at least one full day a week on that, as if I'm getting ready to be ready for an art history master's. I spend another full day a week doing Spanish. I'm in a Spanish group where we practice Spanish conversation. I have a daughter on the East Coast and a son on the West Coast. Travel to see them. We have great places to visit. There's a blend between work, which is my part-time work, and all the other activities that interest me. The biggest surprise is how much I love it, how much I like retirement and what I'm doing.
So part of what when Tom shares, part of what it reminds me of is that for some of us, continuing to work and continue to make income is part of what may fund some of these other adventures and possibilities that would not be otherwise possible. And also, the first time we did this workshop, Francis and Tom were in a panel along with a couple other folks. So the pandemic will also have to be factored in, as we talked last week, in your planning process, because gee, I'd love to see Tom and Francis go live today, but it's lovely to see them on film. So remember that part of the adaptation is going to be how the pandemic has affected you looking forward. As we move, some of you perhaps have begun to work on the push-pull worksheet that we shared with you last week. Today, we have a different tool to introduce to you that you all have in your packet and will be on the website. This is what I like to call the insight to action part of the workshop. So this is a workshop that is a call to action to prepare for retirement or continue to navigate it if you're already there. You've started that process by showing up last week and or today. And so what comes next? And what comes next is a tool for assessing your personal and unique situation and planning what your next move is going to be. This is a tool that you'll find in your packet, that the front page, your next move, has the 5 ingredients that we've referred to. And then there are worksheets and questions attached to it. It's an opportunity for you to take the push-pull worksheet and blend it with this next second tool. It's a work in progress, so you can think about it, write about it, discuss what you discover with important people in your life, and continue to adapt it. Both of the tools, one of the things I find so valuable about them, and I'm using them myself, is the opportunity to see that I can go back to them over and over and over and update them as my life and my situation changes. They're marvelous if you want to run a copy and give it to your partner, for instance, or a friend or someone that you consult with in your life. I believe both tools make for wonderful discussion tools with people that we can get input and feedback from that we really trust and know us well. And so let me just say a little bit more about what the worksheet is. As I said, on the front are the ingredients, and the next page really breaks it down so that you can describe what you imagine your retirement life might look like, what you would want it to look like as you envision it, or what it currently looks like if you're already in this stage. It will ask you to talk about how satisfied or dissatisfied you are with your current situation if you're in the planning process. And it will ask you then to identify barriers, or what I like to call obstacles, and resources or allies in how you will reach a more fulfilling and vibrant retirement. And so barriers can be internal or external. What are the ways that I think about myself in my life that I might get in my own way as through self-criticism or limiting myself as I begin to assess my current situation and envision the future? And what are external barriers? Am I limited by geography? Am I limited by finances? Am I limited by health? Do I have responsibilities as a caregiver? Do I have a partner whose vision of what retirement is going to look like is somewhat different than mine? And we have some discussion and negotiation to do. Then also moving to identifying resources. So what are my internal and external resources? What are the things I have going for me? And what are the things you have going for you as a vibrant, energetic, bright, talented person who's gone through many stages of life that you can use? And then who and what are those external resources that will help you develop this plan and get you to where you want to go? Remembering always, of course, that it's an evolving process. And so this is, of course, a fairly quick introduction, but I think you'll find that it's very self-explanatory and you can really engage and dig deep and think, and I hope write and also share with others. And before we move into talking about resources and questions, I'd just like to finish with my piece with a quote from a, oh, I'm sorry, I left out a slide. Thank you, Natalie, for reminding me. I missed a piece. It's important to remember the where and the who in this process. So are there aspects of how you will pursue your retirement that might be improved in a different geography? Will you be moving closer to family, either to help them or to be helped? What aspects of your life might be threatened, like social connection if you move, long-term relationships and friends? What people might help you most achieve the retirement life? Do you like where you live? Would you like to be somewhere else? And this is certainly a question that some folks have reflected on in the pandemic. And lastly, remember that in spite of the fact that as we enter retirement, we're entering a new stage of life, you're an experienced traveler. You've had many life transitions, you've gone through many changes and many challenges in your life already. What have you learned from those? What can you use from the pandemic, as we mentioned last week, or any other major transition in your life that you've gone through that helps you prepare for the future? You're experienced, you're knowledgeable, you're wise, carry that wisdom forward. And so now I think I'd like to close with a quick quote from, this is from a man named Andre DeShields, who I heard speak on television. At the age of 70, Andre is a lifelong actor who won his first Tony Award when he was 70 years old. And here's what he said that I'll share with you and send you forward with. As you go forward in your life and you age, surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when you enter the room. Remember, the top of the mountain is the bottom of the next, so keep climbing. And slowly is the fastest way to get where you want to be. And I'll turn it back to Nancy to talk about additional resources for you.
Great, thank you, Chris. Okay, so we did send, you should have access to just a list, a Word document that we've compiled where we try to have readings and websites that are relevant to each one of our ingredients. I'm going to highlight a few here to get your juices going. If you'd like to look at this for part-time work, ARP turns out to be a pretty handy organization for people who want to look for encore careers, whether they be full-time or part-time. So check out the AARP website. This link changes a lot, and they've especially focused a lot on the pandemic because older workers have taken a real big hit in terms of job loss. There's also a fantastic book that we reference a lot, the Encore Career Handbook. It's really how to decide what's next if somebody wants to work. So those are two good resources for working. The next one is for self-employment. It's surprising how many folks and stories we hear about full-time workers who want to continue to generate some income, but can do it through a skill that they have, that they can use to their profit. There's some organizations that help you think about how to start and run a business, whether it's for the first time or just at this stage of your life. So there's some websites here for you to look at. Next is education. In this community, there's a lot of options, and all over the nation, I know you are calling in from. But if there's most larger cities now have some sort of an Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. We do here at WashU. It's available to everybody for a very small fee. There are non-credit classes, anything from art to news to climate change. Check it out on the website. If you want to take classes at WashU, U College is expanding, and it's possible to even pursue a degree through University College, much more flexible kind of curriculums. Finally, in this city, but also across the country, a fabulous organization called Oasis that offers many programs. And they also now have something like Open Classroom for very minimal fee. There's classes available online. So check out these resources for ongoing education, whether it's for pleasure or for pursuit of skill development. Lots of online resources for matching with a volunteer opportunity. You can go on one of these volunteer databases and enter an area of interest, enter a locale, and opportunities will pop up. Our United Way Volunteer Center, of course, is working hard to fill all the need in this community for volunteers. More and more virtual volunteer opportunities have emerged since the pandemic. Okay, and let's see, what's next, Natalie? Caregiving. This specifically, family roles isn't all caregiving, but that comes up frequently. What people need to provide care to parents, to spouses, to adult children with a limitation. We had hard copies available if you read, but this is all online now. The Senior Resource Guide, that's a picture of it there. You may access it. It has everything you need to know about any kind of service in the aging network service that might be needed by you or someone that you're caregiving. St. Louis is connected with 2 area agencies on aging ahead. Check out Aging Ahead, and these agencies must provide an information and support hotline, an information hotline. You call up and say, I need this, and they help connect you to services. They also run caregiver support programs. ARP's Community Resource Finder, again, you put in what you're looking for in the area that you're in. So caregiving roles, a lot of resources in the community that people don't know about and don't take advantage of to help them in these important roles. All righty, those are the resources. There's more on the handout. And we encourage you to look and ask some questions about those resources. So now, Cindy, how are we doing? Do we have any questions?
We do have questions to you or Chris. Some bloggers talk about the stages of retirement, some of which might be pre-retirement, full retirement. But the question is around, what do you do when you're not like Mr. Evola and you become disenchanted with retirement? It's just not working for you. What do you recommend?
It's a great question. And I actually, I have an opportunity to work with some folks who deal with this in my clinical practice. First thing I would say is it's not that uncommon. Many of us spend years and years imagining what retirement will look like and looking forward to it. And I think in some ways, some folks idealize it, and it isn't always what we thought it would be, because we're different when we arrive. We maybe have limitations or challenges we didn't expect. And so the first thing I recommend is to not go totally inside and try to figure it out for yourself. Who are, one or two or three people that you trust and feel safe with, that you could process and talk about, and might begin to help you think creatively and begin to investigate some of those resources that Nancy mentioned. Do you have additional thoughts on that, Nancy?
Well, I do know that when people describe the phases of retirement, they do describe the honeymoon period. They can go on for a couple of years. And then people think, oh my gosh, I'm not engaged, I'm not structured, I'm not really that happy or fulfilled. So as again, repeating, it's pretty common. But that's one of our main messages, is for people that have the opportunity to start thinking about it now, so that it's not like I work and then I stop and then I'm on vacation, but then I'm not sure what I do. Is the course pre-planning is so important, to think about getting involved in a volunteer thing or a class. But some of us are already there. We stopped and we didn't do that kind of development of what we were going to do while we were still working. I think our worksheet is still a place to start, to describe a different vision and to think about barriers and resources to get there.
I would definitely.
I think people have described. Oh, Chris, go on.
I would definitely encourage folks to go back to the push-pull sheet, because I think a lot of folks feel pushed from work and idealize retirement, but haven't really spent much time with what am I pulled toward? What do I want to be moving into, and what might that look like, and how will that energize me? Sorry, I interrupted you, Nancy. Go ahead.
Well, I do think that it seems overwhelming to think I have to get this whole big plan. But I've also heard that, just starting one thing can begin to make a difference. One thing, whether it's a volunteer thing or a hobby or trying to pick something up. And just so starting small and starting slow, as Chris said, is the key.
I'm going to take a risk here and ask you a question without giving you very much information. And the question is, some people have responded and said, when you go into retirement, just think like a child. How would you both respond to that?
Oh, that's kind of fun. Well, you've heard me use the word adventure a couple times. One of the things I say about leisure is when we were children, we called it play. We wanted to do it all the time. Then we started to call it working out, and it became another part of our job. So what do we have when we're children? A sense of adventure, a sense of wonder, a curiosity. This is a new and different stage. And what can I discover about myself and my world? And I really believe that's part of what we're talking about here. What, within the limitations that are presented to me through my aging process, what is still interesting and adventuresome, and what can I discover about myself and my world?
Thank you, Chris.
So you had mentioned that the pandemic had caused many people to think about where they live, and that one of the key considerations in retirement is, where do you want to live? If somebody's vision includes the possibility of shaking it up considerably in a major move, what thoughts or advice do you have as they process that to make sure that the choice works out well for them?
Nancy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I will start you off, Chris. I know you have lots of thoughts on this, but I do think many people think I'm going to retire somewhere different. Maybe, go to somewhere warmer, somewhere closer to kids. It might be a great decision, but we just encourage people to think through, where are all of those elements going to be best fulfilled? Because some people do make a move and they are socially disconnected. from an important community, whether it be a religious community or a neighborhood. And they feel the pain of that. We do know that we're driven to be close to family, but we do know that peers are really an important part of mental health in later life. So just do it thoughtfully, thinking about what you're losing as well as what you're gaining before that you make that decision. And then if you move, when you move, how can you replace and get involved so that those other ingredients aren't left behind?
Yeah, I think that's probably the only thing I would add. I guess what I would add is, where are you most grounded, and where would you like to be grounded as you go forward? And I would also add, who are you as a person? So are you someone who would relocate, and you're a very gregarious, extroverted, outgoing person who would thrive on the opportunity to develop a new social system? Or are you very grounded in the community or the neighborhood or the church or the volunteer group that you've been in for years and years, and you have a core group of very close connections? So there's, again, I'm really directing you to go back inside and look to who you are and what your personal experience and unique experience will be.
I saw that yeah, go on, Janet. You see the chat. I didn't want to not miss that.
Exactly. No, I thought this was a great question coming into the chat, so I wanted to elevate. Person asking, what have you found to be the best ways to find friends or expand a social group if somebody's looking to establish some new connections?
One of the things I like to say about myself when I'm working with clients on this is, I'm not a joiner. However, I must join. And so, and I'm not from this area. So how did I create a really vibrant social system that I want to grow into as I age? I really had to become a part of some things and some people that I could form important connections with. Another thing I say to clients is, remember that there might be a certain process of experimentation, kind of back to the question you brought up, Cindy. When we were kids, we might have tried 5 activities before we found something we really liked doing. Maybe I tried soccer and basketball before I found out I really liked chess. And that might be true for you as you go forward into retirement, is to check some places out, check some relationships out, check some activities out, and really find where you make a connection that's useful for you. It is typical. I do a lot of men's work, and I will tell you that as men, particularly traditional men, we sit and wait for other people to contact us that we'd like to spend time with. It will be necessary to initiate. In this process, part of it is a stretch for some of us will be to push beyond our reserve and initiate connection and contact.
So one point that you both have made repeatedly, I guess implicitly, is that this is not a static thing. We are not the same people throughout our lives. As we're contemplating retirement, we're not necessarily the same people that we'll be when we begin. But I'm curious, based on your experience working with people either clinically or just in an informal advice, I know how often to get the oil changed on my car. How often do you suggest people revisit this planning? It's going to vary, but what does that look like as an ongoing tool or an ongoing process rather than a one and done kind of thing?
It's a really good question. Do you have any thoughts about that, Nancy? Of course, I have a couple, so go ahead.
No, go on, Chris.
One is back to earlier question. If you're in distress, it's a good time to revisit the tools. If things aren't going the way you want, it's a good time to revisit the tools. If you've gone through another major life change, someone that you love has become ill, or there has been a change in your finances or in your geography, or there are resources available to you that you've had a new opportunity for volunteerism come your way. Any kind of significant change or shift is also, I think, a really useful time revisit.
Mhm. Yeah. I was also going to mention that it's not exactly related, but Cindy has brought up the point that there's some fear and stigma around retirement because it means you're getting old, right? There's so much fear and stigma around aging. And retirement represents, because of how we've always looked at it in the past, sort of this passage, into old age. So I think as we've changed our thinking just about what later life can be and what aging can look like. So planning for retirement is part of just planning for a good life, at any age. So you're never too young or too old to be visiting these ingredients for a good life and figuring out how you're going to get them now in a workplace, full-time, part-time, or not at all. Because workplaces don't have to be a part of those ingredients. They are for many of us, they're so important to those ingredients. So it just takes a little more planning and thinking about what can give us enjoyment outside of those places.
I will give you a sentence that a good friend of mine who's 81 uses, and maybe you'll take this with you. He says, I'm paying attention to how I will continue to feel relevant in my life. And that word relevance really leaped out at me, and I've kept it with me.
Right. And many people struggle with purpose or that relevant or that usefulness of mattering. And we call it of mattering. And there's lots of ways to illuminate how you matter to people.
And that's certainly a central sentiment. So we are nearing time, and I, as a last question, hopefully not too much of a loaded one, I've been trying to listen for what are some key takeaways or, sort of the pro tips for success in applying this. Listening to you all, I got started on a few, but I want you to comment on anything that I missed that you think is just really central. The first thing that I heard was, as you're embarking on this plan, have some process partners, have a trusted few people that you're checking in with, helping you see your blind sides, encouraging you. A second thing that I heard was start small. If your life is not feeling the way you want it to, start with one thing that you want to do differently, and then do something else differently. A third thing that I heard is if your social connections aren't as robust as you would like them to be, take a deep breath and be the one who initiates to make that change. Is there anything else that you want to throw on there as equally important to seeing your plan in action?
I would just say, now that I'm older people are the most interesting people I know. So I would encourage you to just see yourself as interesting.
Oh, that was a great list, Janet. We need that. We need to make a slide with that in our summary slide. That was an absolute great list. I do think the initiate social contact is hard for people. Every community has some resources for you to know about. In St. Louis, we have the St. Louis Village, and we have Oasis, and we have meetup groups. And it takes the initiative, the one reach out, but there's certainly resources in any community. So maybe you could add any community has resources to help with all of these things, and you need to start looking.
Wonderful. We are at time. So I want to give Chris and Nancy both a chance to add any kind of final thought for this audience before we go.
Just thanks for the summary, and thanks to the team. And always thank you for the questions and the participation. It makes the process so much better.
Yep. And find someone to talk to about these things. Janet, that was a great tip and a great summary. Thank you.
Well, thanks you all for all the time and effort that went into this and this fantastic initiative that you spearhead for our community. To Cynthia and Natalie, thank you so much for helping this program come to fruition. Really appreciate all the positive feedback and participation from the audience. And we hope that we will see you again at another open classroom very soon. Please stay healthy and safe out there, everyone. Take care.